Who is Bob Reynolds, and how is it that one of the most powerful superheroes in Marvel Comics is simply not remembered, forgotten to time? Let's talk about Marvel's Sentry. Before we do that, let me say thank you for watching JL's Comics. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I upload videos just like this every single week. Let's jump into the story. It started with a death. In Marvel Knights Daredevil 9, an article appeared for an artist named Artie Rosen, wishing him well for his illness, and then in January, another article in Wizard magazine announcing the passing of one of the comic world's elder statesmen. In 1961, Stan Lee teamed up with an artist named Artie Rosen to create a character named the Sentry. It was a creation that predated Stan Lee's Fantastic Four, a team and a book that was the founding cornerstone to Marvel Comics. When Rosen passed away in the late 90s, his widow found some old Marvel files in his personal effects, so she sent them to the Marvel offices where Paul Jenkins received them, and looking through them, found some old Rosen sketches for a book called Startling Stories #1, which would have predated Fantastic Four #1. And from there, Jenkins worked with artist Jay Lee and the head of Marvel Knights, Joe Quesada, to create a new version of this ancient forgotten character, except this was all a lie. Fake. It was a story made up for Wizard magazine, who were also in on the gimmick. There wasn't even an Artie Rosen. There was an Artie Simek and a Sam Rosen, but no Artie Rosen. Truly, the Sentry was created by Paul Jenkins from Laird and Eastman's Mirage Studios, and as Paul Jenkins details, quote, "It was originally a pitch for Our Man, but Karen Berger at DC was not interested in publishing anything relating to superheroes, and so encouraged me to create a brand new character. DC and Marvel both promptly turned it down." The older images of the Sentry used in the Wizard magazine articles were drawn by the legendary John Romita Sr. Jenkins pitched the idea to Joe Quesada that he'd been sitting on for a while. What about a character who's super powerful, but whom nobody, not even himself, remembered? Further, what if we make it seem like the readers themselves have forgotten? A truly meta concept. Thus, the Sentry was born. And the beauty of the marketing gimmick is that it reflected the story of the Sentry. He was almost called the Centurion, but thinking it quote-unquote clunky, decided on the Sentry as his name. The character of Robert Reynolds actually first appeared in 2000's Marvel Knights line with a first issue that hit 31 on Diamond's Top 100 list that summer. In the opening panels of his miniseries, Bob Reynolds awakes from a dream as he was startled awake by something, a void in the night. He's back, the narration says, but who is? And against the inky black night, punctuated by the electric flashes and violent cracks of an angry storm, Bob couldn't remember how he got where he was. With his house and his wife, it was like looking at a life through someone else's memories. And then, he says in his head, the void has returned. He was slowly awaking from a fog, a perpetual dream. So with his dog, named Watchdog, by his side, he went to a book on a bookshelf, and in it was a vial with a serum that granted him the power of 1 million exploding suns, the power to change him into the only person who could stop the void, to change him into the Sentry. But was it real? Was it the fragile state of his mind and the torment of his soul hidden beneath layers of grief and liquor? Was the void an ever-present threat as it promised, or was it a figment of a fragmented mind? Was he the Sentry, or was he just a guy barefoot in the rain with a blanket clothespin to his jacket like a cape? In those pages, the nascent days of his existence, we learn that a young Robbie, while still in high school, took and ingested Professor Cornelius's secret formula. And this meek, mild-mannered freshman was imbued with unknown energy and Kirby crackle, which gave him his new powers. And that night he sewed together his golden suit. Then he was fully transformed into the golden guardian of good, the Sentry. He fought his arch nemesis, the Void, whom even the combined might of the Avengers couldn't defeat without his help. His professor, the one from whom he stole the secret formula, tells him that the serum creates a phase shift effect in the molecules of his body, which cause each atom in his body to step an instant ahead of the current timeline. It also induces a photosynthetic reaction, which creates a hyper state of consciousness. The professor told him that his powers are limitless, that he's conquered time and space, and that he is both omnipotent and immortal. But trials on the serum were not finished and the long-term effects not fully studied. The professor warned that he'd need to titrate his dosing up each time because of that. And he warned Robbie was becoming too dependent on the drug. And apparently, Watchdog drank some of the recharging formula, and he also gave some to his friend Scout. So they got powers too, but to a much lesser extent. It turns out that in 1947, the year the Cold War began, both Department K from Canada and Operation Rebirth of the USA Yes, the same ones that gave the world Captain America and Weapon X pooled what little resources they had left after World War II to recreate the super soldier serum. But the concentrated power of the new formula was magnified exponentially. And years later, as the project was contracted out to various labs and private institutions, part of this formula found its way to the academic studies of Professor Hugo Cornelius as the Golden Sentry Serum. And this is what Reynolds took. We also learned that Reynolds, in a bit of a retcon, was a meth addict and decided to take that formula to get high. Although another account says that the Soviets had launched a missile and he took it at the last minute to get that power to stop it. When Reynolds married his wife, the Fantastic Four and the Avengers were there. He was friends with Hulk at the time, who called him Golden Man, and he helped cure the Hulk of his anger. Spider-Man helped him defeat the Void when he joined up with Wilson Fisk. He also taught Angel of the X-Men how to defeat his fear. He even had a massive fortress called the Watchtower, which housed his centrally located organic computer clock, and he had a sidekick, a boy named Billy, who used the name Scout. They fought lobster people and android pirates, Cranio, and Menbot. It was a glorious age, an age of Sentry. But later, as the heroes of Earth who stood shoulder to shoulder against the Void realized that Sentry was Void, that he caused millions to die while also saving hundreds of millions more, they all agreed that he was too dangerous, that the Sentry, for all intents and purposes, should die. It was the only way to save the world, and Bob agreed. So Doctor Strange and Mr. Fantastic set about to erase Bob's memory and that of the world's. Reed told the world that the Sentry cozied up to the mob and that he was a criminal and a traitor, and he was using his powers to support his addiction. So they killed the man, they killed the legend, and then, equipped with hypnotic transmitters, erased the world's memory. He said they needed the people to reject the Sentry for the hypnotic influence to work. It was the loss of a hero, the loss of a friend, a loss of innocence, and the end of a golden age. Decades bore on without him, and now in the present, Bob, having just awoken in that storm, went to the Baxter building, casually penetrating its stasis field security to speak with Reed Richards. He had that voice in his head, "It's coming, the Void is coming." Bob told Reed that he used to be a hero, he remembered, but now everyone's forgotten and just sees him as a middle-aged, 30 pounds overweight alcoholic who took a wrong turn. He then went to Bruce Banner, who actually did remember him. Banner is, interestingly, the other hero with a split psyche. He then went to Spider-Man, who had no idea who he was. He said, "You should, I helped you win a Pulitzer Prize." He reached out to Professor X, who also remembered him. And back at the Baxter building, Doctor Strange showed up in front of Reed Richards, reminding him that they destroyed the Sentry and that memory, and that it was he, meaning Reed, who said, "Keep the memories away, lest the fate of the universe be decided." Bob went to the Watchtower and unplugged Clock, the computer, which caused a brief change in perception, an imperceptible shift in reality. And suddenly the world remembered, which meant it was also doomed because it meant the Void was back too. And so once again the heroes of Earth stood against Sentry, and as Hulk's bones snapped and broke one by one, and destruction totaling billions of dollars in damage ravaged the city, they had to reactivate the hypnotic transmitters to make everybody again forget about the Sentry. And the Sentry, beating back the Void, fighting himself, allowed them to do it, so selflessly and heroically gave up the power of a god in the ultimate act of heroism. Once again, the world forgot, on purpose. And again, years went by. And during Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers run, the villain Electro caused a massive outbreak of 42 supervillains from a prison called the Raft. That's when the New Avengers discovered the Sentry, who was voluntarily kept there. Carnage was one of the villains who escaped, and to protect everyone from Carnage, the Sentry grabbed him and flew right up through the raft, right into space with Carnage, who he then ripped in half. We still learned that Jason Wingard, a villain named Mastermind, had implanted a psychic virus in the mind of Reynolds, where the delusions of this villain named the Void were created. As we've discovered, the Void is actually a split part of Reynolds' own psyche. Sentry is the Void, but he thinks they're two completely different entities. So Emma Frost actually helped him out, erasing the Void, and with Sentry apparently healed, he joined the New Avengers. During Marvel's Civil War, the Sentry sided with Tony Stark, the side who believed in the defense of the Superhuman Registration Act and that government regulation of superheroes was good. Shortly after this, Tony then invited the Sentry to join the Mighty Avengers, which was an officially sanctioned Avengers team. It was in Mighty Avengers issue 4 where Ultron killed Sentry's wife. One of the reasons he was voluntarily imprisoned was because he thought he had killed her before, but his mind was clouded. It was revealed to him that she wasn't, but then Ultron killed her. In retaliation, he ripped Ultron's head off, and later we learned that Sentry actually brought his wife back to life. During 2007's World War Hulk event, the Hulk returned from Planet Hulk with its Warbound to wreak havoc and destruction and to exact revenge on the Illuminati, who were the ones who sent him away initially. Sue Storm's the one who reached out to Bob for help in stopping this rampaging Hulk, but he, at first, said no. He was terrified that if he went out, classic agoraphobia, and fought and lost control, that the results would be catastrophic. It was pacifism versus the great power, great responsibility theory. But he did get up and fight. He took down the World Breaker Hulk and most of the city in the process as he unleashed his power of 1,000,000 exploding suns on the Jade Giant. During a 2009 event called Dark Reign, Norman Osborn was able to manipulate the Sentry into joining his Dark Avengers. Osborn had a murder an Atlantean terrorist cell, but this was more the Void than the Sentry. That darker part of his being was slowly taking over. And in this time, he also fought with the X-Men in Utopia. A piece of the Void passed from the Sentry to Emma Frost, and it took the combined might of Professor X, Cyclops, and Psylocke to expel the fragment from Emma Frost, which quickly jumped into Cyclops, where it lay dormant. In Dark Avengers, the Sentry was killed by Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, but he was able to reform himself from a single atom. Then Sentry, in their attempt to restore reality, actually killed Owen Reese. This is when Carol Danvers says that what Scarlet Witch did to reality during House of M is nothing compared to what Bob could do if he was fully unleashed. Norman Osborn, as Iron Patriot, then ordered Bullseye to kill Bob's wife, Lindy, saying he broke their deal. So not long afterwards, during another event called Siege, the Sentry fully gave in to the Void, and acting on Osborn's order, he destroyed Asgard, which is hovering over the Midwest, by smashing it down to Earth. And he took the god of war, Ares, and ripped him in half, just like he did with Carnage, as he battled an army of superheroes. Iron Man crashed an entire helicarrier on him, did nothing to him. Bob pierced through the Void for a fleeting moment, begging to be killed. So Thor helped him out, and his remains were put inside the sun. The heroes of Earth paid their respects at the cemetery, where he was formally laid to rest next to Lindy. Thor, being the one that killed him, didn't show up, but instead visited Mrs. Reynolds, his mother, in her nursing home room. She remembered him because they had danced at Bob's wedding, and while they danced once again, at the cemetery, Tony talked about how a man with the power of 1,000,000 suns taught him about darkness, about overcoming inner demons and counteracting the poison, that there's always a choice. At his funeral, Rogue broke down and sobbed with grief. He was the only one who she could experience human touch with, and now he was gone. But a few years later, the Sentry was brought back to life. In 2013's Uncanny Avengers 9, the heirs of Archangel, the Apocalypse twins, revived him with a celestial death seed. Along with Daken, Grim Reaper, and Banshee, they became the Horsemen of Death. Sentry and Rogue, who absorbed all the powers of the Avengers, teamed up to stop a massive celestial named Exitar, the Executioner, from destroying Earth. Sentry then moved Exitar's dead body away from Earth. Eventually, Robert was back on Earth, and Doctor Strange had fixed Robert by creating in his own head a mindscape called Sentry World, where Bob could be the Sentry without the risk of the Void being unleashed upon mankind. Gone was what Apocalypse did to him, and gone was his mental turmoil. To access Sentry World, though, he had to use a conflictor, a device created by Tony Stark. Jeff Lemire's 2018 miniseries opens with Sentry in Sentry World, where he's fighting a shadow army with the help of Clock, his computer, Scout, his sidekick, Watchdog, his pet, and Sentress, a female sentry. But Billy Turner, his old one-armed sidekick Scout, in the real world, stole the conflictor, wanting to take its place as Sentry. So then, enraged, he killed Billy and flew off into space. He then came back to Earth, struggling again to learn himself and find his balance. One time while meditating, he started to warp reality around himself. Black Panther and his agents of Asgard detected the warp fluctuations and made contact with him in Oklahoma. It took Fat Cobra, yes, Fat Cobra, to purge him of his evil energies, but then he fled again. Bob went to his friend Reed Richards for help, but there was no way to separate Void from the Sentry. So, on Reed Richards' advice, Bob went to the negative zone. Maybe there was a way outside of the positive zone to split them. And yes, there was. There they split. And Void became ruler of Cancerverse, while Bob was left stranded and alone, adrift in the negative zone, until Silver Surfer found him. Silver Surfer actually merged with Bob, with Sentry, in order to defeat Void and stop the Cancerverse's invasion of the negative zone. It turns out that Void wasn't the leader, but it was in fact Nova. And when Void and Sentry were forced to merge, he killed this Nova, which closed the rift and ended the Annihilation Scourge. The heroes who showed up for the fight went back to the positive universe, but Sentry remained behind to watch over the negative zone. And that's where we leave him at the end of summer 2020, still out there protecting the universe from untold threats and from himself. So where will he show up next? In another event in the MCU? A guy named Justin, who played Ethan on The Walking Dead, picked up some Sentry reading materials at Emerald City Comics a while back, leading many to believe he will indeed be playing Bob Reynolds, the Sentry, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The true story of the Sentry is one of mental struggle, yourself being your greatest obstacle, and also one of triumph. It's about how someone so powerful is weakened by the state of his own mind and his own well-being. It's a fascinating story, tragic tale of power on a cosmic level, and which remains undeniably personal. It's the classic struggle many people experience, that of Freudian ego versus id. In Reynolds' case, the Sentry is ego and the Void is the id. He's as powerful as Superman, but afraid to unleash those powers. He's got the power of a million suns, but afraid to go outside. And speaking of outside, I have to head out, which means that's a wrap on this one, my friends. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this video or videos like this one. I upload content just like it each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is JL Comics, and I'll see you soon.